Vampire King saw his maid's daughter washing dishes at 4 a.m., then found out why she skipped school. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. The cold night had settled over the mansion, casting long shadows through the grand hallways. At the far end of the kitchen, the soft sound of water splashing against dishes echoed. It was well past midnight, but there she was, a young girl in her late teens, washing dishes with a weariness in her every movement. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrubbed each plate, the warm water doing little to ease the exhaustion that clung to her bones. Her name was Emily, the maid's daughter. She should have been asleep hours ago, but the house had its demands, and so did her family. Her mother, a loyal servant to the Vampire King, had worked tirelessly for years, and now it was Emily's turn to carry the weight of their burdens. But tonight was different. Tonight, someone was watching. Vampire King Alaric stood at the door of the kitchen, hidden in the shadows, his amber eyes fixed on Emily. He had passed through the hallway on his way to his private chambers, and had caught sight of the girl through the open door. He had seen her before, of course. She was the quiet, diligent daughter of his most trusted servant. But tonight, there was something different about her. The sound of her scrubbing, the intensity with which she moved, struck him as odd. He had always known her to be hardworking, but why was she up at this hour? His keen senses, honed over centuries, detected a faint tremor in her hands. She was tired, yes, but there was more. Her eyes, though tired, held a certain determination that intrigued him. Emily didn't notice him standing there, lost in her own world, her thoughts heavy with the struggles of her family. She didn't hear the soft creak of the door as it opened, nor did she notice the imposing figure standing just a few feet away from her. It wasn't until she turned to grab another plate that she caught the glint of amber eyes in the corner of her vision. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. "What are you doing up at this hour?" The voice, smooth and commanding, belonged to Alaric, the Vampire King. His tone was not harsh, but there was an edge to it, one that made Emily's pulse race. She quickly stood up straight, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I was just finishing up the dishes, Your Majesty," she stammered, her voice soft and apologetic. "It's late. You should be resting." Alaric stepped closer, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the floor. Emily's hands clenched around the dish she was holding, but she couldn't bring herself to look him in the eye. There was something about the way he stood that made her feel small, as if she were a child caught doing something wrong. "You should be sleeping too, but here you are, washing dishes." Alaric's gaze softened slightly, his curiosity piqued. "Why? What's keeping you up?" Emily hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. She could lie, tell him it was nothing, but she knew the king was not a fool. He would see right through her. Finally, she sighed, putting down the plate she was holding. "I skipped school today, Your Majesty," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to take care of my mother. She's sick, and we've been struggling to make ends meet." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of her admission. Alaric studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in her words. It was clear that Emily wasn't just some lazy girl trying to avoid her responsibilities. There was something deeper at play, something he didn't fully understand yet. His gaze softened, but his mind was already working. He was intrigued, both by the girl's resilience and by the mystery that surrounded her. He stepped forward, closer now, and gently lifted her chin with his finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Tell me more about your family," he said, his voice gentle yet commanding. Emily looked up at him, surprised by the kindness in his tone. She had never expected the Vampire King to show any interest in her or her family. But now, as she looked into his eyes, she found herself speaking before she even realized it. "My mother works here, as you know," she began, her voice steadying as she spoke. "She's always worked for your family, but lately, her health has been getting worse. I had to skip school to help her. She can't keep working like this, but I don't know what else to do." Alaric listened intently, his expression unreadable. He could feel the weight of her words, the burden she carried. And though he had no obligation to help, something in him stirred. "You're not just a maid's daughter, Emily," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "There's more to you than meets the eye." And with that, the conversation took a turn. The night had just begun, and Emily's life was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. Alaric stood still for a moment, his piercing gaze still fixed on Emily as she nervously fidgeted with the hem of her apron. The kitchen felt colder now, the weight of the conversation pressing down on both of them. For a few seconds, the only sound was the soft dripping of water from the sink and the faint hum of the mansion in the background. Alaric slowly stepped back, his face unreadable. "You have done your family no favors by carrying this burden alone," he said, his voice quieter now, but still filled with authority. Emily opened her mouth to protest, but Alaric held up a hand. "I am not here to judge you, but I do see something in you. You are not like the others who walk these halls. You care for your mother. You're strong, far stronger than most people could ever comprehend." Emily felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, but she remained silent. She had no idea what he meant, but something in his tone made her feel both seen and exposed, like a secret she had been keeping had just been laid bare. He studied her for a moment longer before walking past her toward the window that overlooked the sprawling grounds of his estate. The room was bathed in moonlight, casting long shadows across the cold stone floor. "Why do you think I asked you to stay here tonight?" Alaric's voice was low and filled with a hidden meaning. Emily blinked, unsure of his intentions. She had assumed it was because of her mother's situation and her late-night work, but the way he spoke made it feel as though there was more to it. I thought it was because of my mother," Emily replied, her voice hesitant. Alaric turned to face her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "Perhaps, but there is more. I did not bring you here out of pity. I want to help you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Help? She had always assumed the world of the wealthy and powerful, like Alaric, was far removed from her struggles. But now, hearing him speak like this, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. "How could you possibly help someone like me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have nothing to offer. I am just a maid's daughter, working late into the night to survive." Alaric stepped closer, his eyes studying her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. "Your worth is not defined by what you do to survive. You have potential, Emily. There is a part of you, a fire, that I see. Something that could change not only your life, but the lives of those around you." Emily's breath caught in her throat as his words hung in the air. She had never been told anything like this before. It was as if Alaric saw something in her that she had never even noticed herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What potential do I have?" Alaric stepped back, his gaze never leaving hers. "You have a strength within you, one that goes beyond physical labor or survival. You have the ability to influence, to make a difference in the world around you. But you need the right guidance, the right opportunities." Emily's mind raced. Could this be true? Was she really more than just a maid's daughter, struggling to get by? I don't know," she said, her voice uncertain. "I never thought I could be anything more than what I am." Alaric gave her a small, enigmatic smile. "That is the very reason I'm here. To show you what you could become. To give you a chance at something more than this life you've been forced to lead." Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. The Vampire King, a figure she had always viewed as powerful and untouchable, was offering her something she had never dared to dream of. But doubt crept in. Could she trust him? Could she really change her life? "But what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Why are you offering this? What's in it for you?" Alaric's expression turned thoughtful for a moment before he spoke again. "There is nothing selfish in what I offer. I see something in you, Emily. I see a future where you stand beside me, not as a servant, but as an equal. It is not a matter of what I gain, but what you could become." His words hit her like a wave, washing away the doubt that had been building inside her. She had always been told she was nothing more than a servant, that her place was always in the shadows. But now, for the first time, someone was offering her a chance to step into the light. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," Emily whispered. Alaric's gaze softened again. "No one is ever truly ready for a change. But sometimes, you must take a leap of faith. You must trust that you are capable of more than you ever imagined." Emily stood there, speechless, her heart racing. What could this mean for her? For her family? Could she truly change her fate? She had spent her whole life believing that this was her lot, working late into the night, struggling to make ends meet. But Alaric's words had planted a seed of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could be more. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't so sure that she had to settle for the life she had always known. The days following Emily's conversation with Alaric were unlike any she had ever experienced. She found herself caught between two worlds. The world she had known all her life, filled with the mundane struggles of poverty and obligation, and the new world that Alaric had hinted at, a world of potential she never dreamed possible. The mansion that had always felt cold and distant now seemed more like a place where change could happen. The weight of Alaric's words echoed in her mind. You have potential, Emily. There is more to you than meets the eye. She couldn't shake the feeling that something deep within her was stirring, something that could shape her future in ways she had never imagined. As the sun set one evening, casting a warm orange glow through the high windows of the mansion, Alaric called her into his study. Emily's heart raced as she approached the grand doors of the room, her hands slightly trembling. She had spent the past few days working as usual, but her mind had often wandered to the thoughts of what Alaric had said. What was he truly offering her? She had heard the stories about the vampire king, powerful, ancient, and ruthless. Yet, in his presence, she felt something different. He was not just a monarch, he was someone who saw her. Emily, Alaric's deep voice called out from inside the study. She pushed the door open, stepping into the room. The study was just as grand as she had imagined. Shelves of ancient books lined the walls, the scent of old paper and wood filling the air. Alaric stood by the large window, looking out over the grounds. He didn't turn as she entered, but his presence filled the room, making her feel both nervous and oddly at ease. Come in. I have something to discuss with you. Emily stepped forward, her footsteps echoing on the stone floor. What is it, Your Majesty? She asked, keeping her voice steady. Alaric turned, his amber eyes locking with hers. I've been thinking a lot about what we spoke of the other night. Your potential. You've done well here, but I see a future for you that's greater than this. I want to offer you a chance to become more than just the maid's daughter, more than just the girl who scrubs dishes at night. I want to teach you. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Teach me. Yes, Alaric said, walking toward her. I can give you the skills, the knowledge you need to change your life. But it won't be easy. It will require hard work, dedication, and trust. Emily swallowed hard. This was it. The moment where everything could change. Could she take this leap of faith? Could she trust someone like Alaric, someone with so much power, to truly have her best interests at heart? What kind of skills? She asked, her voice tentative. Alaric smiled, a faint glimmer of something almost kind in his eyes. Not just any skills. I'll teach you how to navigate the world of influence, how to use your intelligence and wit to control your own destiny. But first, you'll need to show me you're willing to learn. Emily hesitated for a moment, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always worked with her hands, always been the one to do the grunt work. But the idea of learning something more, of changing her life, of standing beside someone like Alaric, it was tempting. She wanted more. She wanted a chance. I'm ready, she said finally, her voice steady. Alaric's eyes sparkled with approval. Good. I knew you had it in you. He motioned to a chair by the desk, inviting her to sit. There's one thing I need you to understand, Emily. This will not be a simple task. The world you are about to enter is not kind to those who are weak. You will be tested, and you will face challenges. Felt invisible to the world, was no longer the same. She had a future now, a future she could shape with her own hands. But as much as she had learned, there was still a part of her that wondered if she could truly live up to Alaric's expectations. Would she really be able to step into the life he was preparing her for? The answer, Emily realized, lay in her own hands. She had already taken the first step, and the next one was up to her. Weeks passed since Emily had begun her training with Alaric, and with each passing day, she felt herself changing. The lessons grew more intense, pushing her to her limits, but she welcomed the challenge. Alaric had told her from the start that nothing worth having came easily, and every task he gave her only confirmed that truth. The mansion, once cold and imposing, had started to feel like her home in a way. She spent more time in the study, more time with Alaric, and with each passing moment, she saw him in a different light. He was not just the powerful king who controlled everything around him. There was a complexity to him, a vulnerability that he only allowed her to glimpse. One evening, as Emily worked late into the night, her mind spinning with all she had learned, she couldn't help but feel a growing connection with him. She had spent years feeling invisible, but now, for the first time in her life, someone saw her, really saw her. And though she was determined to succeed for herself, there was something else that motivated her, a desire to prove herself worthy of his belief in her. But her training wasn't without its difficulties. One evening, Alaric assigned her a task that would test her in a way she hadn't expected. "Tonight, you will attend the gathering with me," Alaric had said. "You will watch and observe, but you must also be ready. There will be a time when you will need to speak, to use everything I've taught you." Emily's heart raced at the thought. A gathering with the most powerful vampires in the kingdom? She wasn't sure she was ready for that. But Alaric had prepared her for moments like this, and as much as she feared the unknown, she trusted him. As the night approached, Emily stood before the mirror in her room, adjusting the gown Alaric had provided for her. It was made of dark, rich fabric that shimmered in the candlelight, and though it was beautiful, Emily felt like an outsider. She wasn't used to this world, to the elegance and wealth that Alaric moved in. But tonight, she was a part of it, and she couldn't afford to let her nerves get the better of her. When she entered the grand hall, her breath caught in her throat. The room was filled with the kingdom's most influential figures, vampires with centuries of power, all dressed in opulent attire. The air was thick with tension, with whispers and glances exchanged between those who held secrets, those who were always playing the game of politics. Alaric was already at the center of it all, speaking with several high-ranking officials. But as soon as his eyes fell on Emily, a shift occurred. His gaze softened, and he made his way toward her, his movements graceful, commanding attention even in a room full of powerful beings. "Emily, you've made it," he said with a smile, though his eyes were calculating, as if he was assessing her every move. She nodded, though her heart was pounding in her chest. "I'm here, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice steady despite the chaos of emotions swirling inside her. He gave a small nod of approval before turning to a group of vampires standing nearby. "This is Emily," he said, introducing her to them. "She's been learning a great deal under my guidance." Emily forced a smile, but the weight of their scrutinizing stares made her feel small. They were powerful, ancient beings, and here she was, a maid's daughter, standing among them. But Alaric's presence beside her made her feel as if she belonged. As the night progressed, Emily found herself drawn into conversations, learning how to navigate the complex dynamics of vampire politics. She watched Alaric closely, noticing how he commanded respect with just a few words, how his every gesture was calculated, and how his influence spread throughout the room. It was both overwhelming and exhilarating. But then, just as she thought she was beginning to understand, a figure approached them, someone who seemed different from the rest. He was tall, with jet black hair and a commanding presence that even Alaric seemed to acknowledge. His eyes locked with Emily's, and for a brief moment, she felt a chill run down her spine. He extended his hand to her. "I've heard much about you, Emily," he said, his voice smooth and calculated. "The girl who has caught the attention of the vampire king himself." Emily hesitated but took his hand. "I've learned from him," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man smiled, but there was something unsettling about his gaze. "You must be very special indeed." The conversation continued, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this vampire. There was a dark energy about him, one that seemed to have a hidden agenda. As the night went on, she found herself more and more drawn to him, even though she didn't trust him. But before she could gather her thoughts, Alaric returned to her side, his presence immediately calming the unease in her chest. "Let's step outside for a moment," Alaric suggested, offering his arm. Emily gladly took it, feeling both comforted and safe in his company. As they stepped onto the balcony, the cool night air washed over them, and Emily found herself finally able to breathe. "You did well tonight," Alaric said, his voice soft yet firm. "I'm proud of you." Emily looked up at him, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said, her voice sincere. Alaric's expression softened for a moment before he turned his gaze toward the stars. "You're learning fast, but remember, Emily, this world is full of danger. It's not just about knowledge and power. It's about trust. And trust is something you'll need to earn, no matter who you stand beside. Emily nodded, her mind processing his words. She had come a long way, but she knew her journey was far from over. And though she had begun to understand the politics and power of this world, she also knew that the most important lesson was still ahead of her, learning to navigate the web of trust that would shape her future in ways she had yet to realize. As the days went by, Emily's lessons with Alaric became more intense, and she could feel herself growing into the person he believed her to be. The mansion, once an imposing place where she felt like a mere servant, now seemed like a training ground, a place where she could see her future unfolding. The more she learned, the more she realized how much she had underestimated herself. Her interactions with the other vampires were still rare, but they were beginning to notice her. Whispers filled the halls, not of the maid's daughter anymore, but of the girl who had earned the Vampire King's trust. One day, as Emily walked through the grand corridors, Alaric called for her. She stepped into his study, where he was sitting by the window, staring out over the vast estate. The evening light cast a soft glow, highlighting his sharp features. He turned his gaze toward her as she entered. "Come in, Emily," he said, his tone warm, yet filled with purpose. "I have another task for you." Emily's heart raced. Every task Alaric had given her so far had been a step forward, each one bringing her closer to a world she never thought she would belong to. "What is it, Your Majesty?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. "There is an upcoming meeting of the Vampire Council. It's a formal gathering, and I need you by my side. You will observe, of course, but I expect you to also participate in the discussions. You've learned much. It's time to put your skills to the test." Emily's breath caught in her throat. A meeting of the Vampire Council? The most powerful beings in the Vampire Kingdom would be there. She wasn't sure she was ready for something like this. But Alaric had given her so much confidence in herself, and the idea of standing beside him at such an important event filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. "I understand, Your Majesty. I will do my best," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. Alaric smiled faintly, his gaze never leaving her. "I know you will. This is your chance to prove just how far you've come." The day of the council meeting arrived, and Emily found herself standing at the entrance of the grand hall, her nerves bubbling up. The heavy doors swung open, and she stepped inside, the sound of her heels echoing on the marble floors. The room was vast, filled with vampires of every age, each one more powerful and intimidating than the last. The air was thick with tension, the murmur of voices creating an almost tangible buzz in the room. Alaric stood at the center, his commanding presence immediately drawing attention. He turned as she entered, his eyes briefly meeting hers, offering a reassuring glance. Emily's heart skipped a beat, and she straightened her posture, reminding herself of everything she had learned. She was not just the maid's daughter anymore. She had a place here. Alaric gestured for her to come closer, and she joined him at the center of the room, her presence almost unnoticed at first. But as soon as the vampires in the room saw her standing beside him, the murmurs grew louder. There was a shift in the energy, a ripple of curiosity, and perhaps even some suspicion. Emily felt the weight of their gazes on her, but she stood tall, trying her best to remain calm. The council meeting began, and Alaric took the floor, speaking with the authority and confidence that Emily had come to admire. He was discussing matters of territory, alliances, and the delicate balance of power between vampire factions. Emily listened closely, absorbing every word. The discussions were intricate, filled with politics and strategies that went over her head at times, but she understood the underlying current of power. As the meeting continued, one of the council members, an older vampire with long silver hair and sharp eyes, looked directly at Emily. "What do you think, Emily?" the vampire asked, his voice smooth but sharp. Emily froze. All eyes were on her now, and she felt the weight of their expectations. Alaric, standing beside her, didn't say a word, but his eyes held a silent challenge. This was her moment. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had trained for this, had prepared for moments like these. She couldn't back down now. "I believe," she began, her voice steady, "that alliances are important, but they should be built on trust. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, whether it's between individuals or factions. Without it, everything falls apart. The room went silent, and for a moment, Emily felt as though she had made a mistake. But then, she saw Alaric's subtle nod of approval. She had said the right thing. The council members exchanged glances, and slowly, the murmurs began again, this time with a hint of respect in their voices. Emily had earned her place in the conversation. The rest of the meeting went on, and Emily continued to observe, occasionally offering her thoughts when prompted. But the real challenge had come and gone. She had stood her ground, had proven that she could hold her own in a room full of the most powerful vampires in the kingdom. As the meeting drew to a close, Alaric placed a hand on her shoulder. "Well done," he said softly. "You've earned their respect tonight." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. She had faced her fears and stepped into a world that had once seemed so far out of reach. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice full of gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Alaric's gaze softened, and for a moment, there was something more in his eyes. "You did this yourself, Emily," he said, his voice low. "You've always had it in you." As they left the council chamber, Emily realized just how far she had come. She had taken another step toward the life she had always dreamed of, a life where she was no longer just a servant, but someone who could make a real difference. And with Alaric's guidance, she knew this was only the beginning. As the weeks passed, Emily continued to immerse herself in the world of politics and power that Alaric had introduced her to. Each day brought new lessons, and with each passing lesson, her understanding of the delicate balance of influence and trust in the vampire kingdom deepened. Alaric's guidance had transformed her from a shy, nervous maid's daughter into a confident, poised young woman who could hold her own in a room full of the kingdom's most powerful figures. Yet, despite her progress, Emily still felt the weight of her past, the girl who had scrubbed dishes in the shadows, constantly questioning whether she truly belonged in this new world. But every time she doubted herself, Alaric was there, offering a quiet reassurance. One evening, after a particularly intense training session, Alaric called her to his study. Emily had been anticipating this moment, knowing that her next step would bring her closer to the life she had once dreamed of but never believed she could attain. As she stepped into the study, she found Alaric standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. He turned as she entered, his amber eyes softening as they met hers. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but with a certain weight to it, "you've come far. I'm proud of you." Emily smiled, feeling a rush of warmth at his words. It was the first time he had said something like that, and it filled her with a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Alaric nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "There is one more thing I need you to do," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "A test. A real one. You've proven yourself in the council, but now I want to see how you handle the challenges outside these walls. The world you are about to step into is far more dangerous than anything you've faced so far." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. The challenges outside these walls. What could that mean? But she held her ground, determined to show Alaric that she was ready. "I understand," she said. "What do you need me to do?" Alaric studied her for a long moment before speaking. "There is a faction of vampires who are not loyal to me. They've been causing unrest in the kingdom, sowing distrust among the vampire clans. I need you to infiltrate their ranks. You must gather information, learn their plans, and report back to me." Emily's heart skipped a beat. Infiltrate a faction of rebellious vampires? It sounded dangerous, almost impossible. But she knew there was no turning back now. Alaric believed in her, and that belief had to be enough to carry her through this trial. "I will do it," she said, her voice firm. "I'll find out what they're planning." Alaric gave her a small, approving smile. "I knew you would. But be careful, Emily. These vampires are ruthless, and they won't hesitate to use anyone who crosses their path. You must stay vigilant." The weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders as she left his study. She had faced many challenges in her life, but this was different. This was a test of everything she had learned, everything she had become. That night, as she lay in bed, her mind raced with thoughts of the task ahead. She had spent so long trying to prove herself worthy of Alaric's trust, and now that she had his approval, she couldn't fail. She had to succeed, not just for him, but for herself. The next day, Emily began her mission. She donned a simple cloak, one that would help her blend into the shadows, and made her way to the outskirts of the vampire territory where the rebel faction had been rumored to hide. It was a cold morning, the air sharp with the promise of winter, and the streets were eerily quiet. As she approached the hidden meeting place, her heart pounded in her chest. The weight of the task pressed down on her, but she reminded herself of Alaric's words, "You must stay vigilant." Emily stepped into the abandoned building where the faction had gathered, her senses heightened, every sound amplified in the stillness. She crept through the corridors, her footsteps light, barely making a sound. The building was dark, the walls thick with dust and shadows. As she moved deeper into the heart of the building, she heard voices echoing in the distance. She slowed her pace, moving cautiously toward the source of the noise. Peering around a corner, she saw a group of vampires gathered around a table, their eyes focused on a map spread out before them. They were planning something, but what? She needed to hear more, gather more information. Emily stayed hidden in the shadows, straining to catch every word. As she listened, she learned of a plot to overthrow Alaric's rule, to seize control of the kingdom for themselves. They had allies in key positions, and their plan was already in motion. Emily's heart sank. This was bigger than she had imagined. She knew she had to get back to Alaric with the information, but she couldn't just leave now. The faction was dangerous, and if they discovered her, it could mean her life. She waited, breath held, as the meeting continued. The weight of her discovery pressed heavily on her shoulders, but she knew what she had to do. She had to get this information back to Alaric, no matter the cost. Emily carefully retraced her steps, the weight of the information she had gathered pressing heavily on her. Her heart raced as she navigated the shadowy corridors of the abandoned building. She had to get back to Alaric. He needed to know what the rebel faction was planning. But she couldn't afford to be caught. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and every creak of the floorboards felt like an alarm ringing in her ears. The meeting had been a turning point. She now knew that there was a well-organized faction planning to overthrow Alaric, and their reach extended deep into the vampire kingdom. It was not just a minor revolt, it was a coup, and it was already in motion. Emily's mind raced as she formulated a plan to escape undetected. She couldn't leave the way she had come in. Too many eyes would be on the entrance. She needed to find another way out. As she moved deeper into the building, her thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a soft shuffle of footsteps approaching from around the corner. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed herself flat against the wall, heart hammering in her chest. She had no time to lose. The footsteps grew louder, and Emily held her breath, praying she wouldn't be noticed. The figure passed by, a vampire with dark, wavy hair and a long cloak that trailed behind him. He was moving quickly, seemingly in a hurry, and didn't seem to notice her in the shadows. Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She waited a few moments, just to be sure he was gone, before slipping into the hallway and making her way toward the back exit. The building felt endless, as though the walls themselves were closing in on her. But Emily pushed on, her mind focused solely on reaching Alaric and delivering the information she had learned. She had to warn him, to let him know what was coming. She had never felt so vulnerable before. The weight of what she had discovered made her feel both empowered and terrified. As she reached the rear door, Emily cautiously pushed it open. The cold night air hit her face like a slap, and she stepped outside, her legs trembling from both exhaustion and fear. She didn't stop to catch her breath. She kept moving, her senses alert to any sound that might signal pursuit. The rebellion she had uncovered was a dangerous one, and it was clear that no one was safe. She had to warn Alaric, no matter the cost. The journey back to the mansion felt like it took forever. Every rustling leaf, every crack of a twig, made her heart skip a beat. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that someone knew what she had uncovered. But she pushed the thought aside. She had to stay focused. She had to get to Alaric. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the mansion came into view. Emily's steps quickened as she approached the gates, but the closer she got, the more she began to second-guess herself. Was she really ready for this? Was she prepared to tell Alaric everything she had learned? What if the information was too much for him to handle? What if he couldn't protect her or the kingdom? But then she thought of the council meeting, of Alaric's confidence and strength. He had trusted her to do this, to gather the information, and now it was time to prove that she was worthy of that trust. She took a deep breath and stepped through the gates. The mansion's towering walls loomed above her as she approached the main door. She was nearly there. She would tell him everything. As Emily entered the study, she found Alaric standing by the fireplace, his back to her as he gazed into the flames. He turned as he heard her approach, his amber eyes immediately locking onto hers. Without a word, she walked to him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I have the information, Your Majesty," Emily said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Alaric raised an eyebrow. "Go on," he urged, his tone calm but filled with a quiet intensity. Emily took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before speaking. "There's a faction of vampires planning to overthrow you," she began, her words coming out in a rush. "They've been gathering support, forming alliances with key figures in the kingdom. They're already moving, and they have a detailed plan to take control. They won't stop until they've succeeded." Alaric's expression remained impassive, but his eyes narrowed as he processed her words. Emily could see the wheels turning in his mind, and she knew that he was already strategizing how to deal with the threat. "How much do they know?" he asked, his voice low. "Do they know you're working for me?" Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't think so. They were focused on their plan, on gaining more power. I don't believe they suspect me." Alaric nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Good," he said, his voice firm. "You've done well, Emily. Now we must act quickly. We can't let them get any further." Emily felt a rush of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had gathered the information and brought it to Alaric. But she knew this was only the beginning. The battle to protect the kingdom was just starting, and there would be many more challenges ahead. Alaric stepped toward her, his presence overwhelming. "You've proven yourself tonight, Emily," he said, his voice soft but filled with meaning. "You are more than just the maid's daughter. You are someone who can make a difference." Emily's heart swelled with pride at his words. She had come so far, and she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. She had earned his trust, and she was ready to fight by his side to protect everything they had built together. The days that followed were filled with tension and urgency. The rebellion Emily had uncovered was no longer just a distant threat. It was real, and it was gaining strength. Alaric wasted no time in making plans to confront the rebels, but he knew that the time for action had to be calculated. Every move had to be precise. The fate of the kingdom depended on it. Emily had done her part, but she was now fully entrenched in the world she had once been so far removed from. Alaric had trusted her with vital information, and she had proven herself more than capable of handling the pressure. But the weight of what was coming pressed down on her. She could no longer see herself as just a servant, just the maid's daughter. She was someone with a purpose. One evening, as the full moon bathed the mansion in a pale, silvery light, Alaric summoned Emily to his study once again. She had spent the past few days assisting him with the logistics of preparing for the impending conflict. But tonight, he had something different in mind. As she entered the study, she found him standing by the window, his eyes lost in the distance, watching the night unfold. There was a quiet intensity about him that she had come to recognize, a sense of command that radiated from his very being. "Emily," he said without turning, his voice steady. "I need you to do something for me." Emily's heart quickened. She had expected more talk of strategy, more of the plans to deal with the rebellion. But this was different. There was an urgency in his tone that she couldn't ignore. "What is it?" she asked, stepping closer. Alaric turned, his amber eyes locking with hers. "I'm sending you to the heart of the rebel faction. You've proven yourself, and I need someone I can trust to gather more information. They won't expect it, but that's why it's the perfect opportunity." Emily felt a wave of shock and fear wash over her. Her stomach twisted at the thought. Going back to the heart of the rebellion was dangerous. It wasn't just a test of her abilities, it was a test of her survival. But she knew this was what Alaric had been preparing her for. She had learned everything she could from him, and now it was time to put those lessons to the ultimate test. "I understand," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Alaric studied her for a moment before nodding. "You're ready for this, Emily. Don't hesitate. Gather as much information as you can and come back to me with it." Emily nodded, her resolve solidifying. The weight of the task at hand was daunting, but she had a mission to complete. She couldn't back down now. That night, she set out alone, moving through the shadows of the vampire kingdom. She was no longer just an outsider. She was part of something much larger. As she made her way to the heart of the rebel faction's territory, her thoughts raced. She had proven herself capable, but this was different. This was not just about being part of Alaric's world anymore. It was about surviving in it. The journey was long and treacherous, but Emily's training had prepared her for this moment. She moved with purpose, blending into the night like a shadow. When she arrived at the rebel stronghold, the place was darker than she had imagined. The building was old, crumbling, and surrounded by a thick forest that obscured any sign of life. The tension in the air was palpable, and Emily knew that every step she took could be her last. But she pressed on. She had to. Inside the stronghold, the rebels were gathered, their voices rising in heated debate. Emily could hear snippets of their conversations, but she needed to get closer. She needed to hear the plans, the specifics. As she crept through the shadows, she noticed one of the rebels, a tall vampire with jet black hair, watching the entrance. He was the same vampire who had caught her attention the first time she had infiltrated the faction. Something about him unsettled her, but she had no choice but to keep moving. She ducked behind a pillar, her breath coming in shallow bursts. From her vantage point, she could hear the leader of the rebellion, a vampire named Thorn, speaking to the others. "We strike at dawn." Thorn's voice echoed through the room. "Alaric will fall. The kingdom will be ours." Emily's heart skipped a beat. They were planning a full-scale attack. She needed to get back to Alaric with this information, but she couldn't risk being seen. Her pulse raced as she looked around, searching for a way out. She knew the rebels would be suspicious soon. If she wasn't careful, they would discover her. Emily took a deep breath and gathered her courage. The only way out was through the front door. She needed to get back to Alaric, to warn him about the impending attack. She couldn't fail him. She couldn't fail herself. With the information she had gathered, she would make her way back to the mansion and tell Alaric everything. As she moved closer to the exit, Emily's thoughts raced. Alaric had trusted her with this mission, and she couldn't let him down. She had come so far, and now it was time to prove that she was ready to stand beside him, ready to fight for the kingdom they both cared about. She just hoped that when she returned, it wouldn't be too late. Emily had barely caught her breath as she made her way back to the mansion. The forest had been thick and treacherous, the sounds of the night almost deafening, but she kept moving, pushing herself forward with a singular purpose. Her mind raced with everything she had just learned. The rebels were more organized than she had anticipated, and their plan was already set in motion. They would strike at dawn, and if Alaric wasn't prepared, it could be catastrophic. She couldn't let that happen. Her legs were burning, but she refused to stop. She knew that every moment counted now. As she approached the mansion, she felt a chill in the air, the kind that came with impending danger. The gates loomed before her, and she felt a rush of relief wash over her as she stepped inside. But the relief was short-lived. She couldn't waste any time. She had to find Alaric. The halls were silent, and the mansion felt strangely empty. She moved quickly, her footsteps echoing on the stone floors as she made her way toward the study. Her mind was focused entirely on getting to Alaric and telling him everything. When she reached the study, she hesitated for a moment before entering. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and Alaric turned from his desk, his amber eyes locking onto hers immediately. "Emily," he said, his voice calm, but with a trace of concern. "You're back. What happened?" His gaze softened when he saw the intensity in her eyes. "I've learned everything, Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion she felt. "They're planning to strike at dawn. They have the support of several key figures in the kingdom, and they've already made their move. If we don't act fast, they will succeed." Alaric's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. He stood and walked toward her, his steps deliberate, filled with purpose. "I feared this would happen," he said quietly, his voice almost a growl. "But now we know. You've done well, Emily." His words were a mixture of gratitude and admiration, and Emily couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. She had done it. She had gathered the information and brought it to him in time. But now the real challenge would begin. Alaric paused for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "We have to act quickly," he said, his voice low and commanding. "The kingdom depends on it. I'll call the council together at once. We'll need every ally we can get. The rebels won't stop until they have what they want, and we cannot let them take control. Emily nodded, her mind already racing with the possibilities. The situation was dire, but she knew Alaric was capable of handling it. He had always been a figure of immense power, but now, in this moment, she saw him differently. He was not just a king, but a protector, and he was willing to do whatever it took to keep the kingdom safe. "What do you need from me?" she asked, her voice filled with determination. Alaric turned to face her, a small, approving smile on his lips. "I need you to help me prepare. You've seen the factions, the tension. I need you to gather the information we've missed, speak to those in the kingdom who may still be on our side. We need every detail, every piece of intelligence we can get." Emily nodded again, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about saving everything they had worked for. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice filled with resolve. Alaric's gaze softened slightly. "I know you won't. You've already proven yourself to me. Now, let's make sure this rebellion is stopped before it can destroy everything we've built." With a final nod, Emily turned to leave the study, but Alaric called her name one more time. "Emily," he said, his tone softer now. "You've come a long way. Don't doubt your place in this world. You're more than just a maid's daughter. You're part of something much bigger now." His words filled her with a sense of belonging she had never felt before. Had returned to the mansion after her mission, but she could not shake the feeling of dread that lingered in her chest. As she entered the study, Alaric was already there, waiting for her. His posture was rigid, and his expression was set in stone. "You're back," he said, his voice calm but sharp. Emily nodded, her eyes meeting his with a sense of resolve. "I've gathered all the information, Your Majesty. The rebels are preparing to strike at dawn. They've already made their move, and they're confident they will succeed." Alaric's jaw tightened, and his amber eyes flickered with a dangerous intensity. "I know," he said, his voice low. "We've been preparing for this moment, and now it's time to act. The rebellion must be crushed before it can spread any further." Emily could see the weight of the situation in his eyes, the burden of leadership that he carried so effortlessly. He had always been a figure of immense power, but now, as he stood before her, she could see the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady, though her heart was pounding in her chest. Alaric looked at her, his gaze piercing. "I need you to stay with me, Emily. You've proven yourself time and time again, and I need you by my side for what's coming." She nodded without hesitation. This was her moment, the moment she had been preparing for. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Alaric gave a small nod of approval. "Good. We'll move quickly. The rebels think they have the upper hand, but they don't realize just how far we've come. We've been planning for this day for years, and now it's time to strike." Emily felt a rush of determination flood through her. She had always been the outsider, the maid's daughter who had been underestimated by everyone around her. But now, she was standing by Alaric's side, ready to fight for the future of the kingdom. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice steady and filled with purpose. Alaric's gaze never wavered as he turned to face the map laid out on the table in front of him. "We strike at the heart of their power," he said, his tone filled with certainty. "We'll hit them where it hurts the most. Their leaders are in the city, and we'll take them down first." Emily nodded, her mind racing with the implications of the plan. She had seen the power the rebels held, but she had also seen the strength that Alaric possessed. This was a fight they couldn't afford to lose. As they made their final preparations, Emily couldn't help but think about everything she had learned over the past few months. She had gone from being the quiet, invisible maid's daughter to being a trusted ally of the Vampire King. She had proven herself time and time again, and now she was ready to take on whatever came next. Alaric turned to her one last time before they left the study. "Remember, Emily," he said, his voice soft but filled with weight. "We fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of the kingdom. We can't let these rebels take everything we've worked for." Emily met his gaze, her heart swelling with pride. "I understand, Your Majesty," she said, her voice steady and filled with unwavering resolve. "We'll win. Together." The night before the battle, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in her room, the weight of the upcoming fight heavy on her shoulders. She had come so far, but now, with everything on the line, she wasn't sure what would happen next. Her thoughts drifted to her family, to the life she had left behind. But she quickly pushed those thoughts aside. This was her new life now, and she was determined to see it through. The dawn broke, and the kingdom stirred. Alaric's forces moved swiftly, and Emily found herself at the front lines, ready to do whatever it took to protect the kingdom. As they approached the rebel stronghold, Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment that would define everything. The battle would be fierce, but she knew that with Alaric by her side, they would prevail. The first wave of rebels met them with a fury, but Alaric's army was ready. Emily fought alongside them, her newfound skills and training giving her the strength and determination she needed. She had trained for this, and now, it was time to prove herself. As the battle raged on, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of the stakes. The rebels were relentless, but so was she. She fought with everything she had, knowing that the future of the kingdom depended on their victory. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. Emily could feel the exhaustion setting in, but she refused to stop. She had come too far to turn back now. The sound of battle echoed around her, but she focused on the task at hand. Finally, as the last of the rebels were defeated, Emily stood at the edge of the battlefield, her chest heaving with exertion. Alaric stood beside her, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the aftermath of the battle. They had won. The kingdom was safe. Emily had done her part, and she had proven herself to be more than just a maid's daughter. She was a warrior, and she had earned her place by Alaric's side. The aftermath of the battle was both a victory and a stark reminder of the cost of power. Emily stood amidst the remains of the battlefield, the ground beneath her stained with the blood of those who had opposed them. Her body ached, every movement a reminder of the struggle she had just endured. She looked around, taking in the sight of the fallen rebels, their bodies scattered across the field. For a moment, she felt a pang of sorrow. They had all been someone's sons, daughters, or allies at one point. But that sorrow quickly faded as she remembered why this had to happen. The rebellion had been a threat to the kingdom, and now it was over. The victory felt bittersweet. Alaric had been right by her side throughout the battle, his presence a beacon of strength. He had fought with unmatched skill, his power undeniable. But there was something else in the way he carried himself that spoke volumes. He was not just a ruler. He was a protector, a leader who had proven time and time again that he would do whatever it took to secure the kingdom's future. As the battle had raged, Emily had found herself fighting alongside him, her newfound skills coming to the forefront. She had proven herself capable, not just as Alaric's ally, but as someone who could stand strong on her own. And though the fight had been long and brutal, she knew that this victory meant something more. It meant that she had earned her place in this world. But as the smoke began to clear and the sounds of the battle faded into the distance, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. The kingdom was safe for now, but the war was not over. There would always be those who sought to rise against Alaric, to challenge his rule. The peace they had fought for was fragile, and Emily knew that her journey was far from over. She walked toward Alaric, who was standing at the edge of the battlefield, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had been silent since the battle ended, his mind likely already working on the next steps. Emily approached him cautiously, not wanting to disturb his thoughts, but unable to stay away. "Your Majesty," she said softly, her voice breaking the stillness. Alaric turned to her, his amber eyes meeting hers. There was a weight in his gaze, one that spoke of the burden he carried as a leader. "You fought well," he said, his voice low but filled with genuine respect. "You've proven yourself in ways I could never have imagined." Emily's heart swelled at his words, but she knew this wasn't just about her. "We fought well together," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotions that swirled inside her. "This victory wasn't just mine, it was ours." Alaric smiled, a rare, almost imperceptible smile that made Emily's heart flutter. "Yes, it was. But there's still much to be done. The kingdom is safe for now, but the peace we've won will require constant vigilance. The battle may be over, but the war is not." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had always known that the fight for power, for control, was never truly over. There would always be more battles to face, more enemies to confront. But now, standing beside Alaric, she knew that together, they could face whatever came next. The journey they had begun had only just started. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Emily and Alaric stood together, both looking out over the kingdom they had fought so hard to protect. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a brief pause before the storm that was sure to come. But in that moment, Emily felt a sense of peace, knowing that she had found her place in this world. She was no longer just a maid's daughter. She was someone who had proven her worth, not just to Alaric, but to herself. And as the kingdom's future stretched out before her, she knew that her role in it would be as pivotal as his. "We've won," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but filled with the certainty of someone who had found their purpose. Alaric nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "Yes, we have. But now we must build. We must ensure that the peace we've won doesn't slip away. And I'll need you by my side, Emily. You've earned your place here, and together, we will create a future that lasts." Emily looked at him, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She had always wondered if she would ever belong, if she could ever make a difference in this world. But now, standing beside Alaric, she knew the answer. She had already begun to shape that future. And with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The kingdom was theirs to rebuild, and Emily was determined to play her part. The battle may have been won, but their story was only just beginning. The days following the battle passed in a blur of recovery and planning. The victory had been hard-won, and while the immediate threat from the rebels had been eliminated, the kingdom's future was still uncertain. Emily could feel the weight of the responsibility she now carried. Alaric had entrusted her with more than just information. He had entrusted her with a role in the kingdom's future. She was no longer the maid's daughter. She was someone with a purpose, and she had proven herself capable of standing beside him, of helping shape the future of the kingdom. The first few days were filled with debriefings, strategy meetings, and planning. Alaric was not one to waste time. He had a vision for the kingdom, and he would stop at nothing to see it realized. Emily found herself working closely with him, her role growing more defined as the days passed. They spoke often, strategizing about rebuilding the alliances that had been fractured by the rebellion and reinforcing the power of the monarchy. She was more involved in the decisions now than ever before. Alaric was a patient teacher, allowing her to have a voice in their discussions. She had learned much from him, not just about strategy, but about leadership. Alaric was a king, yes, but he was also a man who understood the value of trust, of loyalty. He had shown her that true power came not just from strength, but from the relationships you built with others. As the weeks went by, Emily's role in the kingdom became more defined. She had grown into her position, and Alaric's trust in her had deepened. They worked side by side, making decisions for the future, discussing matters of trade, diplomacy, and defense. Emily had become an invaluable asset to him. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emily found herself standing by the window in her quarters, looking out over the kingdom. The sun had set, and the moonlight bathed the land in a soft glow. The castle, once a place of fear and distance, now felt like home. She had found her place here, beside Alaric, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. The door to her room opened softly, and she turned to see Alaric standing in the doorway. His expression was serious, but there was a warmth in his eyes that she had come to recognize. "I need your advice," he said, his voice low. Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised. Alaric was never one to ask for advice. He was the king, the leader. "Of course," she replied, stepping away from the window and moving toward him. "What's on your mind?" He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "The council is pushing for more control over the regions," he said, his tone thoughtful. "They want more power, more influence. It's a delicate matter, and I'm not sure how to handle it." Emily's mind began to race. She had been present in the meetings where the council had discussed their desires, but this was the first time Alaric had openly expressed his concerns. "What do you want to achieve?" she asked, her voice steady. "I want to maintain control," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "But I also want to ensure that the people are protected. If I give the council too much power, it could destabilize everything. But if I refuse them, it might create discontent." Emily thought for a moment. This was a delicate situation, one that required a balance of strength and diplomacy. You need to show the council that you value their input, but you also need to make it clear that you are the one in charge, she said, her voice calm and confident. "Offer them something, but make sure it's something that doesn't threaten your authority. A compromise, but one that keeps the kingdom's stability intact. Alaric studied her for a moment, his gaze steady. "You're right," he said, his tone filled with approval. "I hadn't considered that angle." He took a step closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You've become indispensable, Emily. I don't know what I would do without you." The words took her by surprise. She had grown accustomed to his respect, to his belief in her, but hearing him speak so openly made her heart swell with pride. "I'm just doing my part," she replied softly, her voice filled with sincerity. "For the kingdom, for you." Alaric nodded, his gaze softening. "You've proven yourself in ways I never expected," he said, his voice low. "You've earned your place here, by my side." Emily felt a rush of emotions flood through her. She had come so far from the girl who had once scrubbed dishes in the dark, invisible and alone. Now, she stood beside the most powerful being in the kingdom, a trusted ally, someone who had earned their place in this world. And as she looked at Alaric, she realized that her journey was far from over. They were building something together, something strong, something that could withstand any challenge. The future was uncertain, but with Alaric by her side, Emily knew that they would face it together. And whatever came next, she was ready. She had found her place, and it was right here, beside him, shaping the future of the kingdom they both fought for. The days following the council's decision were filled with a sense of resolve. The rebellion was no longer a threat, and the kingdom began to heal from the scars of the conflict. But Emily knew that true peace was a delicate thing. The kingdom was still fragile, and the work that lay ahead was immense. Alaric had not only won a battle. He had secured the future of the monarchy, but that future required constant vigilance. And Emily had become more than just an ally. She had become an integral part of the kingdom's rebuilding. As time passed, Emily found herself in a new role, one she had never anticipated. She was not only by Alaric's side in the court, but also in the kingdom's everyday matters. She helped manage the kingdom's relations with the neighboring territories, and as time went on, her intelligence and insight proved invaluable. Her ability to see beyond the surface and understand the true nature of things made her someone Alaric could trust completely. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle, had grown stronger over time. They were not just partners in power, but in life. Emily had learned that being by his side meant more than just advising him. It meant sharing the weight of the kingdom's future, making decisions together, and ensuring that the peace they fought for would not slip through their fingers. They worked side by side, their trust in each other unwavering. Their connection had become something more than just political. It was a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and a deep understanding of each other. As the months passed, Alaric's rule grew stronger, and Emily's influence within the kingdom continued to expand. The council, once divided and distrustful, had slowly united under Alaric's leadership, and the rebels who once posed a threat had either been dealt with or brought into the fold. But despite the kingdom's prosperity, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had come so far, but the road ahead was still long. She had faced the worst the world had to offer, but it was the quiet moments, the moments of peace, that often made her reflect on everything she had lost and gained. One evening, as the sun set behind the castle's stone walls, Emily stood on the balcony overlooking the kingdom. The air was cool, and the sky above was painted in shades of orange and purple. She thought of her family, of how far she had come from the girl who had once scrubbed dishes in the dark corners of the castle. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that she would stand beside a king, shaping the future of a kingdom. She thought of the battles they had fought, the sacrifices they had made, and the price of peace. Alaric stepped out onto the balcony beside her, his presence as commanding as ever, yet softened by the bond they had forged. "You've been quiet," he said, his voice gentle, but there was an edge to it, as if he sensed the weight of her thoughts. "What's on your mind?" Emily smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, about everything we've fought for." Alaric turned to face her, his amber eyes softening as he looked at her. "You've fought just as much as I have. You've earned your place here, by my side." Emily's heart swelled at his words. She had never truly thought of herself as a fighter, but standing beside Alaric, she had become one. "I never imagined this life," she said quietly, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "I never imagined that I would be part of something so important." Alaric took a step closer, his presence comforting, as always. "You've always been part of it, Emily," he said, his voice low and filled with meaning. "This was never just about the kingdom. It was about you, about what you're capable of. You've proven yourself more than anyone else could have." Emily looked up at him, her heart beating faster. There was something in his gaze, something deeper than just admiration. It was something that had been growing between them for a long time, something she had only just begun to understand. Alaric reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "We've come a long way, but this is only the beginning," he said, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "Together, we will continue to build the future, one that lasts for generations to come." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. She had never been the girl who dreamed of power or titles, but now, standing beside Alaric, she realized that her place was here, by his side. "Together," she whispered, the word feeling right in her mouth. Alaric smiled, the weight of the world seeming to lift from his shoulders as he stood beside her, the kingdom's future stretching out before them. The journey had been long, but they had come through it together. The battle was won, but the true work had just begun. And as Emily stood there, hand in hand with the man who had not only shown her her worth, but had given her a place in a world she had never imagined, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Immerse yourself in the world of captivating vampire stories, where power, loyalty, and love intertwine in a kingdom full of intrigue. Follow Emily's journey from a humble maid's daughter to a trusted ally of the Vampire King, as she navigates the challenges of a world filled with rebellion, danger, and betrayal. In this gripping tale, you'll discover how Emily earns her place by Alaric's side and becomes a vital force in shaping the future of the kingdom. As the story unfolds, Emily faces her own internal struggles, while building strong alliances and proving her worth in a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos. Filled with thrilling twists, this tale of love, loyalty, and strategy is one of the most captivating vampire stories that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. Follow Alaric and Emily through battles, challenges, and moments of vulnerability as they fight for a future they both desperately want. In the end, this story is not just about power. It's about finding one's place in a world where survival and trust go hand in hand. Don't miss out on this unforgettable journey through one of the most intense vampire stories of all time, where every choice, every betrayal, and every victory leads to a new chapter in their shared destiny. These vampire stories will leave you yearning for more, as you explore the complexity of relationships, the strength found in unexpected places, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness.